Time.
Chair, thanks, gentlemen, and recognize the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Kinzinger, for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess this will go to all three, but Director Vladeck first and Dr. Post second. In a fiscal climate where every dollar is precious, we do have to be focused on protecting jobs, and we have to be focused on our economy. That's where the real concern is right now. But it appears that the IWG has completely disregarded, any attempt to find out an economic impact that any kind of a ban or suggestion or whatever would have on this. The reality is the food and beverage industry employs 1.4 million workers, 12% of our manufacturing workforce, and it's one of the biggest sources of manufacturing jobs. Now, you said you didn't consider the economic benefits or the economic impact or benefits when creating these guidelines. Is that true, that there were no economic benefits taken into account?
We did solicit questions in our comments, and we expected, if there were economic objections, to get them in our comments. That was not the focus.
So you got 0 comments of anybody that was concerned about the economic impact?
No, I'm not saying that. We
Okay.
did submitted a study, which we gave to our economists to take a look at. The study purported to be based on advertising expenses for ads geared at children.
Right.
And the economic analysis posited that if our voluntary guidelines, principles were adopted by industry, it would essentially end all advertising to children, costing about $2 billion in expenditures a year.
And specifically, what about jobs?
I think it concluded ultimately that there would be a loss of 74,000 jobs. Our concern is that we have many concerns, one of which is there's no underlying data. There's no citations to any of the assertions made in the study. But more problematic, it assumes that advertising to kids will stop, and it uses a figure for advertising expenditures that greatly exceed what industry tells us it is spending.
So your study, your study says 74,000 jobs it costs, but you don't have a basis, so it's probably not actually the case.
It's not our study.
There was a study that you've seen that we're talking about.
You asked about. I
Right.
mentioned the comments. I was explaining that in connection with the comments, this study was submitted. But more importantly, as I tried to make clear before, industry itself has proposed quite substantial changes in its own self-regulatory proposal, bringing it very close to where we're likely to end up.
Right.
Industry is not proposing making these changes if it thinks it's going to cost it money, revenue, or jobs.
Right.
And so, I understand your concern about.
But yeah, it's a big
jobs.
concern. I mean, you got a lot of people that want jobs out there, and when you talk about killing jobs from the government perspective, that's not a good way to get on the right train of creating jobs.
We agree.
I appreciate that.
But voluntary standards don't kill jobs.
Let me ask another one. You contend that these restrictions are voluntary, but some of the most distinguished scholars of the Constitution argue that these would violate the First Amendment, these voluntary proposals. Do you believe the food and beverage industries will treat these restrictions or principles or mild hints or gentle reminders? Do you believe they'll consider them rules? They'll count them as rules? I mean, do you think that they will?
I don't. They're not enforceable in any respect. And
so
that's why
but
they
if they're
don't.
not going to be, if they're not rules and they're not enforceable, then why even go through the trouble of creating them in the first place?
Well, because Congress told us to issue.
Well, we also wanted a report, right, that we're still waiting on?
That is correct.
Do you expect that any time within the next few whatever that we're going to see the report that we actually requested?
We're hoping to get you a report by the end of this year.
Okay, so we were able to get some of the guidelines out, but the report will hold.
Well, the guideline
by the end of the year.
The report will constitute what we're calling principles, guidelines. I think they're
gentle suggestions may be the new words.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you. And I
Thank
yield
you.
back.